England and Wales. John, good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Clive.
What do you make of what's going on this evening?
Well, it's really worrying, and it's worrying for a number of reasons. First of all, we seem to have forgotten, or many of the protesters have, that we're in the middle of a deadly pandemic, and the legislation is in place that, in effect, legally forbids these protests from going ahead. But nevertheless, the urge to protest is greater than the urge not to get this virus. So that's happened, which puts more people at risk, including my colleagues, those dedicated, brave police officers who are doing their very best in the most difficult of circumstances. But also, and I think this is really sad, is there are some legitimate concerns that people have following the tragic events in America. But those concerns are being hijacked by people who are hell-bent on violence and causing mayhem. And they have come out, and we've seen it, and they're not protesting. They're just intent on causing harm to my colleagues. I mean, some of the things we saw yesterday in London was horrific. And I don't know whether you saw, Clive, but when my colleague fell from a horse, and as we now know, has received some serious injuries, some members of the crowd were laughing, they were cheering. Even some commentators, some apparently sensible professional commentators, were making a joke of it. I mean, this is a disgrace. It really is. And some of those individuals, I'm sure they've got no morals anyway, but I hope they take a long, hard look at themselves, because this isn't how to remember somebody who's died in the most horrific of ways over in America. It's not the way to get your message across that you feel that racism in this country and elsewhere needs to be tackled head on. This is being hijacked, and shame on them for doing it. But my colleagues will stand firm, and they'll do their absolute best to make sure that people can legitimately protest, even though this protest should never have gone ahead because of the pandemic. But we're not in a great situation for all sorts of reasons.
Is it made all the worse as well, though, the fact that the police are having to police this demonstration, but for some of those protesters, the police are part of the problem. They're demonstrating against the very police who are policing the demonstration.
Absolutely. I've been a police officer for 27 years. I'm proud to be a police officer. I've been involved in some very difficult situations, full-on public order situations, and people get incredibly passionate about what they are trying to protest about. And I'm not going to say that things are perfect in this country, but I don't think it's only policing. I think it's a lot broader. It's a societal issue. But what does frustrate me, Clive, is that we are compared, especially to America, our policing style. I'm not talking about society in general, our policing style. Nothing could be different. And whilst many people will disagree with this statement, we have the best police service in the world, the most restrained. I accept some people will fundamentally disagree with me on this, but our style of policing is we police by consent. And of course, we don't always get it right. But some of the links that are being made, some of the references that have been made to our style of policing and that of America are fundamentally wrong. But yes, some people just have a real dislike. I'll choose my words carefully. A real dislike of policing. But 27 years ago, Clive, when I was joined as a police officer, it wasn't necessarily about racism, it was about other things. Some people just fundamentally don't like the rule of law, and police officers are seen as the guardians of that.
Sure.
So there
But
will
some of them
always be
base that on
pushback.
bad experiences that they've had.
Absolutely. And I've spoken, and this is what we need to do as a society. And the genuine protesters out there who've got a legitimate concern, they need to have their voice heard, and we need to listen. We do, but we can't listen in the midst of such violent and outrageous actions towards my colleagues and wider society, because the message will be lost, and that's not in anybody's interest.
What do you think about the way you police these events? Sometimes the police can kind of hold out a hand and try and show support. We've seen some police officers actually taking a knee. What do you think about that?
It's really difficult because this current situation is incredibly sensitive, and my colleagues will be aware of that. And that's why we've seen, although this is ultimately an unlawful protest, the police commanders and the bosses, whether it's in London or elsewhere around the country, they have been understanding and flexible to the needs of the protesters. And there will be a softer approach. Now, we are damned if we do and damned if we don't, because we are being criticised for being too soft in these demonstrations. And as your reporter said earlier, there will come a point where enough is enough. Police officers have to move in; they have to move people along because the violence is getting too much. And police officers, we're human beings, Clive. We might have a uniform, and we're upholding the rule of law, and without fear or favour, so we don't get involved in politics or so on. But there will be many, many police officers, myself included, who have real sympathy with the core message. But we can't get involved in that whilst we're policing what is in effect a demonstration, and that's why it's so important that we hear what these legitimate concerns are, and more importantly, we don't ignore them. As a society, we do something about it.
What do you think about this statue being pulled down in Bristol and dumped in the river?
Yeah, well, I only heard about that quite recently, and I'll be honest, Clive, I don't know the background of the statue, although I understand that it's caused a lot of controversy. Look, I'm a police officer. The rule of law is really important. If the citizens of Bristol do not believe, for whatever reason, that a statue should be in place, then they should go through the democratic process. They shouldn't take the law into their own hands and rip it down, because that's lawlessness. Is that the sort of society we want? It's not the sort of society I want to bring my kids up in. So whilst they might have concerns, the way that they've dealt with it, they've committed a criminal act. No matter how sympathetic some may be to that cause, but ripping down a statue and dumping it in the river is not the way to behave.
Thank you very much, John Apter, joining us there, the National Chairman of the Police Federation of England and Wales. Back to your calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973.